Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing our study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are on the section in the first canto, second chapter, beginning with text 6. We've already studied these. Savai Pung Sang Paro Dharma Yato Bhakti Hokshaje. This is the part 1 we dealt with. And I'm just going to review those verses, just read the translations to kind of give us some context. Give me a second here. And I'll call those up. Sorry about the delay. I should have planned this. Okay. So we began with text 6. The supreme occupation of Dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krsna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Text 9. All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to the sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. So then the question is, what is that absolute truth? And the next verse defines it. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. And that brings us up to today's verse, which is first canto, second chapter, text 12. Tatchadadhana muniho jnana vairagya yukteya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shrutigrihitaya. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. And I picked out a section of the purport here. And I'm just gonna... The absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord, Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead, who is the full-fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence. The Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is but a partial realization. There are 4 different types of human beings: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialists, whereas the other 3 are transcendental. The first-class transcendentalists are the devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. The second-class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the absolute person. And the third-class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the absolute person. So, this verse, if we recall, just go back up again. Uh-oh. Doesn't look possible. Okay. Tat Shadadhana Muniya. Now, Prabhupada defines that the Shadadhana as seriously inquisitive. And of course, this includes the idea of faith. Will be, as mentioned here, Shadadhana Muni. Faith means that one comes in touch with the science of bhakti, and one comes in touch with a pure devotee, a pure source of knowledge about that bhakti. And this purport, because I just took one part of it, a lot of it has to do with the qualities of hearing. Here it says Shruti Grihitaya, what one has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. And that includes the Bhagavatam, which is the best commentary on the Vedanta Sutra by the same author, as Prabhupada always point out. So one has to be, first of all, the equality is one is equipped with jnana and vairagya. Now, it's already been explained that this jnana and vairagya naturally develop by practicing devotional service. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayat Yashu Vairagam Jnanam Chayirahoitakam. This was the second in the series of verses, text number 7. So this is a very important point, because in Bhakti Yoga, one doesn't have to come to the point of knowledge and vairagya before beginning bhakti. This was Srila Prabhupada proved when he came to America, the land of the Mlechas and the Yavanas, who are completely outside the Vedic culture. And he didn't give any prerequisites for that. Only such and such person, only the Brahmins or only those who have a certain qualification can practice Bhakti Yoga. He invited everybody to come, chant Hare Krishna, take prasadam, dance in ecstasy, and to hear him speak. And so how do they have the qualification to hear him speak? By practicing Bhakti Yoga, even a little bit. Those who came and chanted and took prasadam, mute it. They acquired the preliminary interest, the atato brahma jigyasa, the jigyasa, or the curiosity and the interest in what Prabhupada was teaching. So this is, here you say, equipped with knowledge and detachment. Well, that knowledge and detachment may be in their preliminary form, but if they're enough to keep one hearing from the proper source, it's the emphasis in this purport is one needs to hear from the proper source with the proper attitude. Prabhupada famously, and this verse comes up in this series in a few verses, Shushu Sho Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi. How does one develop an attraction for hearing? And that is by approaching a pure devotee who's a moving tirtha and serving. That service can be different kinds of services, but the service establishes a relationship, and then one gets an attraction for hearing. And that Shushu Sho, Prabhupada would then translate it basically two ways, as submissive oral reception and ardent hearing. So this is the key, that this whole process is developed and is focused on hearing, and thus developing the sword of detachment and one's attraction for Krishna. So that's part of what is being explained here. Then this purport, I advise you, actually, if you're really interested, to go back to the section and read the purports, because we're just touching on them. So, so Prabhupada says here that their devotional service is not meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentalists. One really needs to be intelligent. And then he goes into the different statuses of devotees, the Uttama Adhikari, the Madhyama Adhikari, and the Kanishta Adhikari. So Kanishta means the beginners. We're maybe attracted to the deity worship and things like that, but we're not serious about hearing and chanting or studying the literature and really making serious advancement. But that's okay. One can come from that platform to the second platform. Prabhupada emphasizes that, and this is a verse he quotes, although he doesn't quote the Sanskrit, from the 11th canto. Ishvare tad arineshu badisheshu dusatrucha prema maitri kipopeksha yat karoti samadhyama. This is an important platform to aspire for. So the Madhyama Bhakta, he recognizes 4 categories of entities. The first is the Lord himself, Ishvara. And then those who related to the Lord, the devotees. Then there are those who are innocent. They're not militant atheists or, asuras or anything. They're just a vast mass of innocent people who are confused, but they may be open for learning about Bhakti Yoga. And then finally, there are those who are out and out enemies of God, and we read about so many of them in the Bhagavatam and Krishna book like that. and they are declared enemies of God. So the Madhyama Adhikari, or the Madhyama Bhakti, he relates to each of them in a different way. For the Lord, he tries to develop loving devotion. Prema, Maitri, for the devotees, friendship. It's very important that we develop friendship with the other devotees, and how we share that friendship is mentioned in the Upadeshamrita. You may study that. And then for the innocent, it tries to show mercy by giving them Krishna consciousness, giving them a book, an imitation, a prasadam, somehow or other connecting them to Krishna, and so they can begin their devotional life. And for the envious demons, you ignore them. So this is an important platform to come to. And this is exactly, that Madhyama Adhikari is exactly the person who is eligible for going through this series of verses and developing bhakti, chiefly through hearing and chanting. So that's what this first verse is about. To rise, I made a little note here, to rise to the second platform, this Madhyamari, one has to hear from the right source with the right attitude. So we need to cultivate that. And then Prabhupada makes the point, because he wrote this in India, of course. This is from the first canto. And there he was confronted with many, speakers of Bhagavatam, Bhagavat Saptaha, 7-day readings, and, mostly reading the Rasa dance and so many things. So one has to be careful to avoid hearing about Krishna from non-devotees. And Prabhupada quotes 2 verses, although he doesn't quote the Sanskrit. This verse, I think it was given by Sanatana Goswami, or Vaishnava Mukod Girnam Putam Hatikatam Mitam, Shavanam Naiva Kartavyam, Sarpatishtam Yatapaya. That the Harikatha is like nectar and it's very purifying. That's what that Putam Hatikatam Mitam. But if it's emanating from the mouth of a non-Vaishnav, a Vaishnava Mukod Girnam, one should never hear it, because it has the quality of milk touched by the lips of a poisonous serpent. It may look the same, it may taste the same, but it has a poisonous effect, because the heart is not there. The motive, everything has to go back to the motive. Why do we do what we do? So this person is speaking in order to attract a following, in order to make money and so forth. The motive is contaminated. The pure intent is not there. And then another thing here, so-called devotional service, and these two tied together, that has no relation to the Shrutis and the Smritis. Shruti Smriti Puranari Pancharata Badhin Vina, Aikantaki Haraya Bhakti Utpataya Vakalpate. This is quoted, I believe, by Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that the so-called one-pointed pure devotion to Hari, Aikantaki Hari Bhakti, which has no reference to the rules and regulations given in the Shruti, the Smriti, the Puranas, and the Pancharatra, which we consider the Pancharatra, which we consult for deity worship especially. This is simply a disturbance in society. And this, although Prabhupada didn't find this element when he first came, because there was hardly any Vaishnavas. Now we find that we find people who are not able to follow the strict rules and regulations. They still want to practice Krishna consciousness in their own way and read about the gopis and Krishna and so forth. So this is also, we have to be very careful. And best thing is to stick with the authorized ISKCON representatives who are faithful to Srila Prabhupada and speaking from his books, which are all completely bona fide, of course.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So we are still not able to see any other screen other than 1 to 12. Is that what we have? Or
yes, that's what we have. I'm moving to the next one now. Okay. So now we're going to, okay, this we read. So we're going to text 13 now. Atak pumbid vidashreshta varnashrama vibhagashaha swanustitasya dharmasya samsiddhi haditoshanam, or best among the twice born. It is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality of Godhead. And an excerpt from the purport: human society all over the world is divided into 4 castes and 4 orders of life. The 4 castes are the intelligent caste, martial caste, the productive caste, and the laborer caste. These castes are classified in terms of one's work and qualification and not by birth. Then again, there are 4 orders of life, namely the student life, the householder's life, the retired life, and the devotional life. In the best interest of human society, there must be such divisions of life. Otherwise, no social institution can grow in a healthy state. And in each and every one of the above mentioned divisions of life, and this is Prabhupada's emphasis, the aim must be to please the supreme authority, the personality of Godhead. So the previous verse was explaining how the absolute truth is realized by practicing devotional service according to the Shastra, the Vedanta, and the Bhagavatam. And this is true, this is pertinent for every member of society. And that the Varnashram, we have this institution in ISKCON, as you may know, a ministry, Daiva Varnashram ministry. And there are some projects throughout the world which trying to show an ideal situation usually in the farm setting, where you're able to have, you know, cow protection and Vaishyas and so forth, and Brahmins and Kshatriyas, because society is without these divisions are always there. At least the Varna divisions. There's always an intelligent caste, a martial caste like to rule, a productive caste, and many laborers. But without having Krishna in the center, it becomes degraded, and the higher castes try to lord it over the lower castes, and we have some of what we have in India today, where the center is not. The aim must be to please the supreme authority, the personality of Godhead, and the different orders of life and the spiritual orders, brahmacharya, grihastha, vanapasta, sannyasa, all have to be centered on that, because otherwise we lose the opportunity, the golden opportunity of the human form of life, which is stressed throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, how rare it is and how valuable it is to be born in a human being, and especially to have the opportunity come in touch with the genuine devotional service and the genuine persons practicing it, and the books giving our instruction in this. So we need to take advantage and realize that the idea is whatever social situation we find ourselves in, we should make our individual aim and our social aim to please the personality of God, which means to take up bhakti yoga, pure devotional service. Remember, the first verse sets the tone. What is the supreme Dharma? The supreme Dharma is devotional service, that which evokes pure devotional service, which is characterized by a hoituti apradiyata, means no material motivation and no interruption. To come to that point, to aspire to come to that point through the process of devotional service. And if that focus is maintained, then our material life as well becomes spiritualized, because we keep that in mind as the central point. So then the next verse will describe the actual process. There's one verse giving a nice important process. So we'll go on to that next verse now. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.14. Tasmad ekena manasa Bhagavan satvatam patihi Shrotavya kirtitavyascha Jayat pujashcha nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. So this is the Dharma. This is the supreme Dharma that's being spoken of here, the practice of it. And then from the purport, in any one of the above mentioned castes and orders of life, the 4 processes, namely glorifying, hearing, remembering, and worshiping, are general occupations. Especially in modern society, all activities are more or less dependent on hearing and glorifying. Any man from any social status becomes a well-known man in human society within a very short time if he is simply glorified, truly or falsely, in the daily newspapers or in the internet. Sometimes political leaders of a particular party are also advertised by newspaper propaganda. And by such a method of glorification, an insignificant man becomes an important man within no time. But such propaganda of false glorification of an unqualified person cannot bring about any good, either for the particular man or for the society. Okay, sorry about that. Therefore, such activities are a waste of time. The actual object of glorification is the personality of Godhead. I'm trying to get rid of this thing here. The tendency to glorify others or hear others must be turned to the real object of glorification, the Supreme Being, and that will bring happiness. So I picked out this section because we're in the middle of this political season, and it's so fraught now. I mean, every day there's some new atrocities, but it all is directly related here to what Prabhupada is talking about. This tendency to glorify, to praise others and focus them, make them famous, is going on throughout society, whether it's a Vedic society or a demonic society or whatever. But that natural process needs to be focused on Krishna, because otherwise the glorification of those who are demons or impure, then that affects yourself. In other words, that what you hear, what you repeat, what you revere and worship, and this worship word should be understood in the broadest sense. Just like in the Bible, there's this whole idea of worshiping mammon, which is worshiping matter. In other words, and that's in the Bhagavatam, in the 87th chapter, the prayers that personified Vedas. There's this wonderful verse which I'm assuming none of you know, but it's because it's very long. But it talks about that worshiping of matter. Napadadam manchaho sadupasana mahano yadunshaya brahme urubaye kusharira mutak. So this is one of the personified Vedas is praying to Mahavishnu, the Lord. My dear Lord, the human form of life is perfectly suited to serving you. And when one uses one's human form in serving you, then the body itself becomes one's friend, just like any devotional paraphernalia. And you, from within your heart, as a super soul, very happily you direct such person, and everything is very nice. But alas, for those who do not take their pleasure in serving you, but instead worship the impermanent, asadupasanaya, literally worshiping matter. Asadupasanaya atmahano, this is virtual suicide for the soul. In other words, you can't kill the soul, but you understand, for the spiritual life. And instead of going back to Godhead, you wander in so many other bodies, bad bodies, not human, even subhuman bodies, which are full of fear and suffering. So the idea is that we have this great chance as human beings, but if we misuse it, we're all doing some occupation. And so what we hear, again, hearing the glorification of the Lord from the right source with the right attitude, and then repeating that and hearing and chanting and glorifying the Lord. These are the central processes of devotional service. And here in this, just go back to the verse itself, if we can. Hello. I'm sorry, that's the next one I went to wrong. So, ekena manasa, one pointed attention. Achieving that is maybe a lifetime, but that one pointed attention is so important. With one point attention of the mind, worshiping Bhagavan, the Lord of the Sattvatas, the devotees. How? By hearing, chanting, glorifying, meditating upon, and worshiping. Always and everywhere, sometimes it's said. So this is, of course, the standard of pure devotion. But this is the central practice of devotional service. But the series doesn't end there, because then the key element is, you'll describe in the next verse the result of this, which is getting the sword of remembrance, increasing one's remembrance of Krishna at every step. But it all keys on the desire to hear, the taste for hearing. And we're going to hear about that also today. So going on. So then from that process of always hearing, chanting, meditating upon, worshiping, then one gets this, this next verse comes. Text 1 to 15. Yadanunyasina yukta karma gandhina bandhanam chindanti kovidastasya kona kuryat kataratim. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work or karma by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? So, Anudyasina means the sword of remembrance. That's the sword he's talking about, because that's what occurs from the previous verse. We read, come on. Jaya Pujas Nityada. By one pointed attention, worshiping the Lord through hearing, glorifying, chanting, meditating upon, and worshiping, one will attain this sword of remembrance. And that sword of remembrance, the knots, binding knots of reactionary work. So this is these karma granti. These sometimes they're called hridaya granti, the knots in the heart, and they take different forms. There's the binding ropes of our previous activities, both pious and impious, which are binding us to birth and death. And there are also the knots of desire, unlimited desire. Asha, pasha, shata, bandha, it's described in the 16th chapter. So all of those have to be cut by the sword of remembrance, which is the fruit of sincere devotional service described in the previous verse. So then it says, so who would not be attracted to hear? Well, there's a lot of people aren't attracted to hear. Those who have not come in touch with the devotees, who are not, have become purified by hearing even inadvertently the holy name. They've not read any of Prabhupada's books. They're not attracted. But here he's speaking about among those devotees who are, those people who he's speaking about in the earlier verses, who are focusing their attention on pleasing Hari, who are practicing what he described in the previous verse, then they're katara team. And then you get attraction for hearing and chanting. So, and then, so this is a key element. Let's see what a section from the purport is. All right. Let's put this guy down. Not easy to, okay. Start with that. The contact of the spiritual spark with material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from the actions and reactions of fruit of work. Liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. This liberation automatically follows for one who constantly remembers the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This is because all the activities of the Supreme Lord, his Leela, are transcendental to the modes of the material nature. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore constant association with the spiritual activities of the Supreme Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. Therefore, any sensible man who is above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead by hearing about him, by glorifying him, by remembering him, and by worshiping always without cessation. Sorry about this. We got to fix this next time. That is the perfect way of devotional service. So this is, central, very important instruction for all of us. So we're all, every person, every living entity in this material world is in this situation of being bound up by the reactions of previous activities. Human beings and subhuman beings and superhuman beings, or everyone except those who are actually in Vaikuntha, are bound up by their previous activities. And we act in ignorance, and by ignorance we perform sin, as Srila Rupa Goswami explains in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And then we suffer even more pains. It's one thing to be bound up by birth and death. That'll happen as long as you don't go back to Godhead. But it's a worse situation to be in complete ignorance and perform all kinds of sinful activities, lose the human form of life, go to and suffer hellish punishment. So this is our actual situation. And the urgency of an inquiry, the urgency of inquiring into the science of bhakti, so that we can escape from this bondage and be reinstated in our original position of Satchidananda, eternal life, full knowledge and full bliss. This is the actual meaning of human life. Everything else is a distraction. We have to come to the realization of this. And this section of Bhagavatam as a whole, and this section really strikes that home. So just to go through this little section of the purport. Liberation, now we know there's a kind of paradox here. Some of you may be wondering, and I sometimes wonder, because sometimes it's emphasized how we should be really serious about getting free from the bondage of birth and death and going back to God. And probably 1,000 lectures he spoke about this. But in the ultimate truth, or the ultimate reality, is that devotees ultimately become indifferent to liberation. They become indifferent to liberation because they're so absorbed and feeling so much nectar and bliss by serving Krishna. They don't care. Nadanang nasundarim kapitang vaja gadisha kami ye Lord Chaitanya taught us what we should pray for, what we should aspire for, taking the role of the devotee. Says, I don't want wealth and women, followers, the fruits of mundane piety, liberation from this world of limitless anxiety. He says, Janmani Janmani Shure, oh Lord, birth after birth, let me have this, just like we read here, a haituki bhakti. Janmani Janmani Shure, bhavatad bhaktir a haituki tvayi. Unmotivated, not even desiring liberation, simply desiring the pleasure of Krishna. And when we act in that way, then the pleasure that we derive from not caring about our own pleasure, just caring about Krishna's pleasure and meditating on him, that will destroy even the desire for liberation. And we see that amongst all the great devotees. And so, but in our preliminary state, in order to get us on the path, Krishna says right in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, different elements of knowledge, one very central one, Prabhupada would always emphasize, to always be seeing the dangers and the pains of birth, old age, disease, and death. And that should make us serious, but our ultimate point, or ultimate objective is not liberation, but it's a very important preliminary objective. So Prabhupada's, he's emphasizing that now, and this is emphasized in this verse. Liberation automatically follows for one who constantly remembers the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. Now we should know that there's a progression. We start with chanting the holy name. The central practice, it never ends. It's not, it's not just for beginners. It's going on in the spiritual world. But the experience is different for the beginning and the because one who focuses on the holy name and realizes more and more the holy name, you realize the form, the qualities, and the pastimes of the Lord, because Krishna is absolute. If you're chanting purely, then those elements of Krishna's personality and his activities will also manifest, and you realize them. So that's why Prabhupada talks about the Leela. Now this brings up one verse. I don't know if I shared this with you once, but there's a chapter in the 12th canto. I forget the number of the chapter, but it's the different kinds of annihilations are described. The universal annihilation, when the whole universe is drawn back into Mahavishnu, and the Brahma's day, each time he goes to sleep, there's an annihilation, the temporary, partial annihilation. And then even our own death is an annihilation for us. So after this kind of sobering chapter, there's a beautiful verse at the end. It says, well, now that we've described samsara, here's how to get out of it. So he says, samsara sindham mati dustadam mutti tirshor. Nanyak plavo bhagavadak purushoktamasya. Lila katavasa nishevana mandarena pungso bhave devadaduka davardi tasya. I don't have the number of this verse. I'll provide it later. But it's in the 12th canon. So what's he saying there? That this samsara is like a big ocean. Samsara sindham. Ati dushtanam, very difficult to cross over. But those who are eager to cross over, utti tirshor, There's no other boat besides what I'm going to describe than this boat I'm going to tell you about. That's the boat. Is cultivating the taste and the desire for relishing the pastimes of the Lord. There's no other boat. For those who are human beings, who are suffering the unbearable burning miseries of being in this ocean of birth and death. So we have been, the verse by the Goswamis, about the Goswamis, I think it's the third one. There's a line, Papo tapa nakuntano to nubatam govinda gana amitai. Some of you may be familiar with that line and that verse. So what it means is that those who are suffering extreme miseries due to extreme sins, papa utapa nakuntana, they're cutting them off. They're destroying him. This here it says the word cutting is here, but from the verse. Arunyasina chindandi. What does it say? Yaduruyasina yukta karma granti nabandhanam chindanti. That cut off the reactions of our previous work. So here is it cutting off the suffering, relieving the suffering. How? Govinda Gana Amitai, by pouring down nectarian songs about Govinda upon our head. In other words, giving us these wonderful vibrations, and I'll share a few with you. The Goswami has written, that completely absorbs the mind. In what? In the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Krishna. Exactly what is describing here. They're all attractive. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore constant association with the spiritual activities of the Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. So this is these verses are coming to a high point now. We won't complete it this time, but it's basically talking about cultivate somehow or other, no matter what station in life you're in, an attraction for hearing about Krishna, hearing the holy name, and hearing about his qualities, instructions of Krishna and Gita. Everything is based on that attraction for hearing, and that's one of the lines I think we're going to come up in one of the purports here. Okay, moving on. We now go to, oh boy, this thing kind of paralyzes the screen, and we got that thing coming up. Oh, how did this come up again? All right, anyway, here we are. All right, let's see if I can move this. All right. So here's the last verse we will cover today. How to get attraction for hearing. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.16. Shushusho shaddadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchihi Syan Mahatsevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat. O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains the affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. And from the purport, the servants of God come to propagate God consciousness, and intelligent people should cooperate with them in every respect. By serving the servant of God, one can please God more than by directly serving the Lord. The Lord is more pleased when he sees that his servants are properly respected, because such servants risk everything for the service of the Lord, and so are very dear to the Lord. The Lord declares in the Bhagavad Gita 1869 that no one is more dear to him than one who risks everything to preach his glory. By serving the servants of the Lord, one gradually gets the quality of such servants, and thus one becomes qualified to hear the glories of God. Then here's the main thing we should take away from all of this lesson today. The eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. So this eagerness to hear about God is about Krishna is something you'll find so wonderfully described and explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Lord Chaitanya, especially you find in the Madhya Lila and the Anchal Lila, he was simply glorifying Krishna, mostly by just giving out the holy name. And just by people seeing him chant the holy name and hearing him, they would attain prema. And they would go back to their own towns and people would associate with them, and they would attain prema. And this way, Lord Chaitanya is spreading movement all over the world, all over India. And also you find so many wonderful conversations in which he converted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was a dyed-in-the-wool impersonalist, although very pious and appreciative of Lord Chaitanya. And they would spend their time, especially the Antya Leela, simply hearing and chanting and absorbing for hours and hours on end at a very high level of ecstasy. So this is the great devotees, the Lord himself showing as the highest devotee. But this is really our task as devotees, to lead our life in such a way that we're more and more glorifying Krishna and hearing the glorification of Krishna. Study Srila Prabhupada's life. Practically at every moment, when can you think he wasn't glorifying Krishna? He was waking up in the middle of the night and producing his books, right, by dictation or typing. And then he would meet with devotees later on, go on morning walks. He's simply glorifying Krishna and meet with the professors or the reporters or whoever it was. All day, he's just relishing that absorption and giving others a chance to hear, become purified, take them. This is how the movement is spread and is spreading. This book distribution is all simply glorifying Krishna, glorifying the Lord in the most wonderful way, because it gives people a chance to associate with the pure devotee by reading his books. So this is the first qualification, is the eagerness to hear, getting the taste. This is the ruchi, as back to the verse, Vasudeva. Okay, I guess I have to click on this and then go up. What is it? Vasudeva Kataruchi. Shushu Sadhanhanasya Vasudeva. So this Shushu, now this verse is this word comes up again and again in the Bhagavatam, second verse of the Bhagavatam, 112. Dharma approach to Kaitavo says, what's the need of any other scripture? It says, Srimad Bhagavate Mahamagata King Vaparadi Shara Sadyo didn't have a Kutabi Shushu Shabis Tachara, the same word. That simply by hearing this Bhagavatam with this attitude of Shushusho, which is, as Prabhupada define it again, ardent hearing, submissive oral reception. Taking in, just listening, taking it in. You remember how Prabhupada with his spiritual master, he noted Prabhupada's, they like to hear. And Prabhupada would listen to his spirit, even when he couldn't understand what Bhaktisiddhanta was talking about because of his high philosophy and what he was teaching. He would still listen. And he gave us the opportunity to do that also, and we should take it. So this is the means, the service to the great devotees. And Prabhupada says, I don't know, he said in this purport, but he said in other purport, the prime service one does for one's spiritual master is to hear from him. And that goes for, we may say, spiritual masters, those who are preaching and those who are writing. This is the greatest appreciation. One who is trying to spread the message of Krishna, when he finds an eager listener, it's just like so enlivening. You listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures in 22nd Avenue. He finally has his own place. He has his own audience, wholly and solely Bhakti Yoga, and it's not in the Bowery with all that craziness. And his voice is cracking. He's so excited, to sometimes to spread this, the words, and he's, full enthusiasm, and you can, and it's catching, that his absolute surety and certainty of these amazing philosophical concepts and his obvious realization is so attractive for anybody who's a little interested in transcendental philosophy like that. So this is our lesson for the day, and it all culminates in the third lesson. We see how full realization of God progresses from this hearing. With Krishna's understanding, we're hearing. He's in our heart, and he purifies. This is the next verse, very important verse, and it will describe full realization in the next few verses. So. I think we're ready for any questions or discussion, Ananda.
Wonderful, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu. one thing that stands out amongst many wonderful things that you brought up today was the purport from 1 to 17. The eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. So fascinating, Prabhu. We have the books, but when a teacher teaches, we are able to understand it so well. So thank you for that, Prabhu. This is the second part of the 3-part series, and we will have the third part later this month. And, it's almost like purport on the purport, it's so beautifully described by you. So thank you so much, Prabhu. So there's some questions that had come through private as well as through the chat forum as well. So this
All
is
right,
the first.
I'm going to stop the sharing now. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay, Prabhu.
Okay.
So the first question that came through is, the verse 1 to 12. That you covered today first, right? So in that particular verse, Prabhu, so according to the sequence of how to progress, so with that jnana and vairagya, knowledge and detachment, then we hear from Vedanta Shruti, it says, and then of course through devotional service one attains the real absolute truth. So now the question is, especially it says what we have heard, and that is typical for a Shruti versus Smriti. So is a Shruti, some sort of, is it only Vedic literatures and Smriti is Puranas? So how do we understand it? Is it because Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra? How do we understand that?
Yeah. If you read the purport, you'll see that Prabhupada is not emphasizing, or one has to go through and hear the whole Vedanta Sutra. He talks about Vedic literature there, and let me just, if you allow me, bring it up. And it was 12, right?
Yeah, 1 to.
Yeah. So he doesn't emphasize that, you have to understand although he mentions Vedanta Shruti, it's understood that the authority there has to receive instructions of devotions from the authoritative sources of the Bhagavat. The number one Bhagavat is the established personality of the devotee. The other is Bhagavat is the message of God, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada is emphasizing on the Bhagavatam, and I think I mentioned this. The Bhagavatam is the natural commentary on the Vedanta, and really makes it intelligible to us. If we try to study Vedanta, it needs a commentary. So the question of what commentary we're going to get. Well, as you may know, Lord Chaitanya, he accepted Bhagavatam itself as the best commentary. So he didn't write one or have one written during his time, but later on, it became necessary. I'm going to that whole story in Jaipur, with the Mahants. There was some doubt about the Gaudiya Vaishnava line. And so Vishwanath Chakravarti was the most learned, but he was aged at that time. So his disciple Baladev Vijayabhushan went to Jaipur, prayed to the deity, Govinda, Govinda, and got the blessing to write it. So he's considered Govinda's writing. It's called Govinda Bhashya. So we have our Gaudiya Vaishnava commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, but the Bhagavatam still stands as our main means of hearing here, because the verse was what? Tatshradana muniyo jnana vairagya prashyantyapani chapanam bhaktya shruti grihitaya. So the shruti, engaging in bhakti according to the authoritative shastras. That's what is being spoken of here, and that detachment and knowledge will naturally develop if we take up the process as Prabhupada has given it to us.
Beautiful, Prabhu. That answers the question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. There are a couple of more questions. This is with regard to the 14th verse, Prabhu, 1 to 14. Just a very simple question. So here the question was, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship. So there are 4 points that are given there: hear about, glorify, remember, and worship. So the question is glorifying the Lord from devotees' perspective, newcomers' perspective. So glorification of the Lord, how is that repeating the prayers of great personalities? Will that be part of glorifying the Lord, or is there something else that devotees can follow?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, the glorifying the Lord comes in many, many different ways. Just like distributing books is glorifying the Lord, going out on the street, glorifying the Lord, or, maintaining a temple. In other words, it's not, if the deities are being taken care of nicely and programs are going on nicely, that's a very important aspect of glorifying the Lord, is maintaining the atmosphere in which glorification can take place. I mean, Prabhupada, was so eager to start these centers and maintain them because he knew that we need this. We're not going to go, all the, Babaji's wandering in the forest. That's not, very few can do that. And as we know, Krishna's more, he regards as the greatest, his greatest devotee, those who are constantly spreading his message, who are teaching it to others. So glorification comes in many forms, but the primary form, as you mentioned, is repeating the message of that, as we've heard it from the Shastra and from the two Bhagavats, the person Bhagavat and the book Bhagavat. Now, there's so many varieties. I was talking about the beautiful songs and the beautiful verses and that have been, bequeathed to us by our great acharyas like the Goswamis, And we certainly shouldn't neglect that. When we get a chance to meet with devotees and get absorbed in pure chanting and hearing, the mantra, the kirtan, melas, and so forth, we should take advantage for that. But as well, any activity that goes to glorify Krishna and his name, form, qualities, and pastimes, and message and service is part of it. So that's where we should be absorbed in.
Beautiful, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. So a couple of more quick questions, as I mentioned, it's coming through. One more private question that came through was on 1-16. The question is, serving devotees who are completely free from all vice, and that sort of impregnates us with that potency to hear the messages of the Lord. So in this Kali Yuga, generally people are fault finders. So how do we fulfill this? Who will be the devotees who are free from all vice, or are we expecting perfection in an imperfect world?
Well, the way I take this now is that it's not, we should kind of transcend the limitations of time and place. We're trying to be on the Vaikuntha platform, and we know that there's no passage of time in the spiritual world. So, and certainly, when we pick up a book of Srila Prabhupada's and read it, and especially when we read it with other devotees and discuss and like that, we should know that Srila Prabhupada is pleased, the whole parampara is pleased. In other words, and Krishna is certainly pleased. It's not that the service to Prabhupada ends because he's not physically present. This is my meditation for the last, 44 years now. It's going to be 44 years this year that Prabhupada is gone. But I don't consider that Prabhupada is really gone. That now that I can't please him by the service if I'm following the programs and and giving classes and doing what I do. This is also pleasing. So this is service, and especially again, just emphasize, because that's what this whole section is about. By seriously studying, even a section like here we're doing this one section of the book, the Great Bhagavatam, and meditating it, trying to absorb the lesson here that's coming out, and especially sharing it with others. This is service to Prabhupada. This is the most. He gave us so much instruction, mostly in 1977 when he was preparing to leave. How the service to the spiritual master, of course, when there's some opportunity for personal service, one should take it very eagerly. But the most important way in which we have the association, which is the beginning of any kind of services, through the words. And so Vani and Vapu. So that service to Srila Prabhupada by following his program, sticking with his society, working in so many ways to the mood and the method that Srila Prabhupada gave us, following that, is going to give us the affinity for hearing his messages, especially as he gave it to us in his books. So we shouldn't think that, oh, we can't find those devotees who are completely freed from all vice. Sure, as sadhakas, we have various impurities, no question about it. But the overall focus of the devotees in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is to glorify, go back to Godhead by becoming pure, and the means for doing it is serving Krishna in the way that Srila Prabhupada outlined, engaging in bhakti yoga, as he outlined in his books. So this is the great service to the devotee completely free of vice, and we'll find that we'll become very attracted to hear from Srila Prabhupada through his books and lectures and other ways about Krishna when we're absorbed in that service to his society.
Beautiful answer, Prabhu. Beautiful answer.
Sure.
Beautiful. Do you have time for one or two more questions, Prabhu?
Sure.
Okay. So another question, I'm going to read this as it is. Kindly repeat, what do the scriptures say, how one advances from Kanishta Adhikari to Madhyamam, Uttama Adhikari stage through hearing and chanting and association of advanced devotees and eagerness, or is it something else?
I'm sorry, could you, what was the first part of that question?
What does the scripture say about how one can advance from Kanishta Adhikari to Madhyama Adhikari to Uttama Adhikari? Is it through chanting and hearing and association and eagerness, or is it something else?
No, that's exactly how it is. And one should, like I cited that one verse, Ishade Tadari Neshu, the 11th canto, these 9 yogendras, there's so much important instruction there. And this is from one of those 9 yogendras. They're discussing the different levels of devotees. That was the question that Ignimia asked. And that's, that second Madhyama Adhikari platform is one we're meant to aspire for. And it definitely manifests by, the process we've just been discussing in these verses. But, there's so much to it, like how to relate to the other devotees. This is such an important point, and there's so much of that in the Upadeshamrita. Rupa Goswami has given us so much practical instruction. Utsaha, Nishchaya, Dharya, you have to cultivate enthusiasm, but you have to be patient and determined in the matter of what? Tat karma pavartanat, all the different do's and don'ts of bhakti yoga. And by this, at the same time, avoid association with non-devotees and follow in the footsteps of the acharyas. I mean, there's a, super practical instruction for advancement, all of those verses. So these writings of the Goswamis directly follow in the line of the Bhagavatam. Jiva Goswami's Satsandarbha is all based on the Bhagavatam. And, the writings of the Goswamis, Rupa Goswami, they're expanding on what's already there in the Bhagavatam. So it's exactly the point, and we'll see in the third part 3 here, it's a progression of purity through hearing. That's really what it's talking about. And that purification is taking part, is being done by Krishna himself in the heart. He sees how eager we are to hear and how we're doing nicely, and from within the heart, he's taking away these abundance and anarthas that are. We have to remember that we're already pure devotees. We just, it's covered over. It's a covering. The question is removing that covering, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, purification. It's very encouraging. It means that we already have the potency within us, every single one of us. But it's the sincerity by which we apply the purification process, beginning with hearing and chanting. And then we can all become pure devotees in this life, or hopefully not too many lives in the future.
Thank you, Prabhu. So maybe we'll wrap it up with one last question.
Sure.
So it's a general question that is asked is, when we consider, or Srila Prabhupada mentioned Chaitanya Charitamrita is postgraduate study. So is there a reason why when devotees were still in the beginning stages, embryonic stages of Krishna consciousness in 66, 67, etc., Was there a reason why Prabhupada chose to give so many classes on Chaitanya Charitamrita to them?
Well, he did. He didn't give that. I mean, he was giving classes in the morning. I don't know how long it lasted. There were a few recordings of his Chaitanya Charitamrita classes, but you notice that the sections of the CC that he picked out, it was actually the beginning of the instructions by Sanatan, which is is of course essential. He wasn't speaking from Antya Leela there, but Prabhupada wasn't waiting for his devotees to become pure devotees before he gave us the highest thing. I had my own personal experience of this. I think you didn't read my little bio there, which is fine. I'm glad you didn't. But one of the things that I experienced, I joined in '73 of March, and by March of '75, I was in LA and we're preparing for this marathon. There's 17 books in 2 months. So what was the marathon? It was mostly the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, I wasn't directly involved at first, but eventually they had to call me in because they were running out of time. So what's the chapters? I had a real mix. Some of the chapters, one of the ones I did was at the end of the 5th canto, the hellish, punishments. That was quite an experience, meditating on that in the middle of the night because you were doing all, pulling all kinds of hours. But then I was also called to edit 4 chapters of the Antya Leela, 13, 14, 15, and 17. And if you read them, you see that it's the highest, and most intimate stuff that Prabhupada gave us is there. And I said, my goodness, I'm just 2 years in the movement here, and I've been given this chance to work on this material. So it's not that these things aren't available to us. We have the 10th canto, we have the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's purifying, and it's given. Srila Prabhupada gives it to us in such a way. There aren't very many long purports there, and I'm telling you also, just take a few minutes here. I was part of I don't know how many of you know about this history. Now we're going way back in the 70s to the Gopi Baba Club. Is that generally understood what that was? Or is that maybe something new to many of you?
It'll be new to many of the devotees.
All right, so let me explain the Gopi Baba Club because it directly deals with this question. You have to understand that when books came out in the 70s, devotees would read them, they would devour them, and each book that came out kind of changed the movement. Because there's a lot of new information. Like I remember the 4th canto came out, and suddenly this whole thing, this allegory of Paranjan, it really, just made devotees very serious. 5th canto, that was a challenge to surrender to it, and also the descriptions of the hellish planets, and Judd Bhart's teachings. There's a lot of serious instruction there, and Raj Shabdev, of course, and each canto that came out. So when suddenly the whole CC basically came upon us. We didn't have anything but the Adi Leela basically, and then the whole Madhya and Antya Leela. So some devotees, reading the 8th chapter, some of you may be familiar, that talks with Ramananda Roy, the Madhya Leela, it talks about how the real goal is to gain Gopi Baba. We should try to find out our original form, our Siddhadeya, it's all there. So a whole group started. We said, well, this is the purpose of the books and of the movement. And we found passages in Nectar Devotion also, but mostly the CC. And we'd get together. Now, I just wanted to hear the reading of the CC. I wasn't really so much, I realized that this is a little over our heads, but I thought, okay, I'll just listen to the CC. But I saw it became very political because it was challenging. So much of the regular preaching where the presidents and the GBC, they were trying to get the devotees up in the morning and doing this. Well, come on, we're dealing with the highest stuff, And so there was an element to it. I dropped out, thank God. So when Prabhupada came to LA, after the marathon, the books were out, he was informed about this Gopi Baba Club, who they just read certain passages from the CC to try to awaken their Gopi Baba. And Prabhupada was furious. Even though the books were out there, the question is, you're not supposed to focus on that exclusively. He wanted us to read it, but not to, just read that alone. So there was a meeting, And Prabhupada is, said, this famous phrase came out. First is to attain your Gopi Baba body, your Siddhadeha now. Simply follow step by step, So he busted the whole thing. And it was movement wide. I mean, there was a period there where you're afraid to read the Anti Leela. I think nobody was So there's a time and a place for these things, and it's not, but so much more has come out now. Books have been published, that follow these things. So one has to be careful and monitor one's own actual progress, not to ignore them, but not to focus on them exclusively, and realize the preliminary stages of purification that are necessary to take place before one becomes eligible to, focus on these things. But by the same token, I remember when the Anchu 1 came out, I was working on, I was part of the whole team, and what hadn't come out yet, but I was reading the verses already. Oh, so many beautiful verses, like from Vidagda Madhava, nothing intimate about it. Suganda makanda pakanda makadanda simadade vinisyande bandi kutamada pavrindam muhudidam. Kotandolan mundo natabinadalash chandanagade mamanandam avrinda vipanamatulan tundalayati. This is a verse Krishna is describing as he's walking into the forest of Vrindavan, and how the Vrindavan forest is giving him so much pleasure. And he describes the sweet nectar oozing from the newly grown mango buds is so fragrant that it's attracting whole swarms of honeybees. And they've been turned into Vandis. A Vandi is a professional praiser, So these bees, they don't just hum, they sing all kinds of verses glorifying Krishna, So he's hearing all that. Vandi Kritamada Bavrindam Muhuridam. And the soft breezes coming from the Malaya hills, which are fragrant with sandalwood, are causing the tree twigs to dance, Mando Anilais Chandana Gere. Mamana, in this way, my bliss, Mamanandam Vrinda Vipandam, is being increased more and more by the Vrindavan forest. So just that one verse, I memorized it, obviously, and it's such a beautiful meditation, and fills your mind with wonderful thoughts of Krishna and Vrindavan like that. Why not focus on it? There's nothing intimate about it, So we have to be careful and not get, too much emphasis on things we're not really eligible for. But there's so much in Srila Prabhupada's books that can help us to become attracted to Krishna. He gave us Nectar of Devotion in 1970. That's one of the first books he gave. And, it doesn't deal with so much with conjugal, there's a mention of it, but that's a whole other book in itself, Ujjvala Nilamani. I don't know if you know that. But so much wonderful, description of the friendship and the parental ras and the friendship ras there, we can become attracted to. So we have full opportunity to develop our love for Krishna. And gradually, these things will become revealed to us.
Prabhu, thank you so much, Prabhu. So, we won't get all these, information that had happened in the past about the Chaitanya Charitamrita marathon, etc. We can only get that from you. And the ISKCON Scarborough devotees are aware of that. They're so grateful, and that's why they keep asking us to engage you more and more in these classes, so that we can gain all this information that we will never be able to get, Prabhu. So on behalf of all the devotees, we'd like to thank you for your continued service, Prabhu, and we hope to have you soon. I think it's on 21st of February, which would be the concluding part of this 3-part series. And of course, we want to continue with more of your classes. And Prabhu, on behalf of devotees who have been asking me, if we can get more of your nectar poems, the audio and also the words, so that they can hear and relish the beautiful verses as well. So if you can, if you get time to put some things together, if it's not already there, devotees will appreciate that, Prabhu.
All right, I'll see what I can do. It's a kind of a busy time for me, but I have some recordings that I've already made that I can make more available. And I'll be in touch with you, Ananda. You can tell me what I've already provided, because I've...
Sure. Will do, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dravidas Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.